Hello race fans, my name is Taylor and welcome to Above the Yellow Line, the show where we talk all about the updates, theories, news, recaps, and more of the NASCAR Cup Series. Today, I want to spend some time talking about the latest news updates from the sport, as well as the pre-race discussion for the Super Bowl of NASCAR, the Daytona 500, which is happening Sunday the 14th at 2:30 p.m. on Fox. We're going to go over the events of the first practice and qualifying of this week for the 500. Then I want to dive into the fresh paint schemes on the track and my top five paint schemes. I think I'm going to limit it down to top five. And then I want to talk about the past data from the races here at Daytona and who to look out for. And also I'm going to give my very, very tentative prediction as to who the winner might be. So let's talk about the track and the race for a few seconds. It is a 200-lap race, 500 miles, hence the Daytona 500. The track is 2.5 miles around the oval, and the drivers put their car on the oval track for the first time this season yesterday for the practice and qualifying. Going over the first practice of the season, it was so nice to see all the cars on the track, the ones that we have not seen yet in the Busch Clash, all the fresh paint schemes this year, which I'll go over near the end of the podcast here. The interesting thing for me about the practice is we saw the Toyotas dominate. All the full-time Cup driver Toyotas led the field 1-5 in the fastest times at practice today, and Bubba Wallace topped the charts as the fastest car. I was really excited to see that new team, the new car, the 23 from 2311 Racing, topping the charts. It gave me hope for him this season. He also qualified pretty well in the Daytona 500, not just pretty well, very well. We'll talk about that also a little bit later. Looking at the chart for the practice, I was pleasantly surprised with Christopher Bell. He kept up with his Toyota teammates, being the fifth fastest car in the first practice. I mentioned in the second podcast with the driver lineup for this season, I was pretty nervous for Christopher Bell. I do think he was a great talent in the Xfinity Series. The talent hasn't changed, it's just the Cup Series is definitely a tier up, and he did not fare well his rookie season. But this is promising to see him fifth fastest in practice, keeping up with the teammates, as I said. Really promising stuff. Jamie McMurray, going down the list for the practice roster, was sixth fastest coming out of retirement to race the Daytona 500. Love Jamie Mack. Super excited he's back. Corey LaJoie, with his new team in the number 7 for Spire Motorsports, was the 7th fastest in practice. And Eric Jones, that Jones boy, was 11th fastest in his new team with Richard Petty Motorsports. But practice is just that. It's practice. It doesn't mean you're going to do well in the qualifying per se, especially at Daytona. And we saw a pretty fairly significant mix-up with the qualifying. I'll put the qualifying roster up on your screen here. Now, the qualifying roster is still up in the air because we have the duels, which will mix up the starting positions based on which drivers win those two races happening tonight. So I'm looking forward to seeing who wins, talking about those in the podcast I'll put out most likely tomorrow. But let's go back to qualifying and 2021 fashion, coming off of a great year that 2020 was. The lights went out on the track to start the first qualifying of the year, and it took about 15 minutes, a little bit over, I think, to get the lights back on, and then the show was underway. No surprises here. We did see the Toyotas do super well in practice, so I thought maybe there'd be a mix-up this year to have a Toyota on the pole. But if you look back at the last 8 years, if you're not counting this year, the Chevrolets have been on the pole 8 years in a row since 2013, starting with Danica Patrick. So when I saw Alex Bowman have the fastest time in qualifying, I was a little shocked at first just because, like I said, Toyotas, but it was no surprise. The Chevys always come back in the qualifying for the Daytona 500. So Alex Bowman is your 2021 Busch Pull Daytona 500 winner, right next to teammate William Byron. The next honorable mentions were Bubba Wallace qualifying 4th in the brand new car this year, like I mentioned, the 2311 Racing team. He did super well in the first practice, going first fastest, and now he's qualified 4th. I think that is great for his team. He said he's going to win a few races this year. I'm starting to believe it. I wasn't sure. There's always uncertainty with a driver going to a new team, a new manufacturer, but this is very promising. Bell also in a new team, new car, not a new manufacturer, but he qualified 7th. Like I said, a little skeptical on him at the moment, but very impressive run for him. Two other Drivers I am extremely impressed with are not regular season drivers this year. David Reagan and Ryan Preece had to race their way into the 500. Ryan Preece raced his way to 8th in the qualifying spot, and David Reagan qualified 13th, and extremely impressive to get into the crown jewel, the Daytona 500. Two other honorable mentions I want to talk about is Daniel Suarez, also in a new team, qualified 10th, and Kyle Larson qualified 15th. Really impressive for them and their new cars. Kyle Larson coming back after suspension. So those are your qualifying results. Like I said, they are going to mix up a little bit after the duels tonight, but pretty impressive run for all those new guys in their new cars. Very excited to see if they're going to be able to keep their positions on the track and what they're able to do, but Daytona is super exciting. It's a little bit of a crapshoot, so we'll see if they can make it to the end. But before we make it to the end of the race, I have to look at the paint schemes. The top 5 I found most impressive for this year before all the cars are being bruised and damaged after the chaos of the 500. I'm going to start with my 5th pick for my top 5 paint schemes of this race. Bubba Wallace in the 23 car, the black, red, and white scheme. I love how it pops. I love the cleanliness of the lines. The DoorDash scheme, I love it so much. So that was my number 5. My number 4 needs no introduction. I mentioned it in the last podcast. The William Byron car that has reminiscence of the 24 car back with Jeff Gordon with the rainbow colors. I don't think there's a color in the rainbow they haven't used on this car, maybe besides purple. I love the neon numbers on the side of the car, the Exalta 24. Moving on to the 3rd car in my list, the Christopher Bell machine of the 20. It was super odd seeing this paint scheme on the 19 during the Busch Clash on Martin Truex Jr.'s car. It's nice to see it back where it belongs, seeing Christopher Bell with the paint scheme and a lot of the new drivers repping new companies, new teams, and paint schemes. It's odd to see the combination right now, but besides the fact, I love this car. I love the design. I like how it's a little wonky. The lines are a little wonky, but it all just kind of comes together. The yellow and black car, the number 20 DeWalt. The second place car on my top 5 paint schemes goes to Alex Bowman. Needs no introduction. I talked about his car on the last podcast and how I just freaking love the design and the colors. It's reminiscent of when Jimmy Johnson drove the paint scheme for the past year or two. I love the purple, the Ally purple, and they added the blue in there, as I mentioned as well, of the Nationwide 88, bringing some of the old design to the new Ally 48. I'm in love with this paint scheme, and it almost made it to the top spot, but not quite. And now we reached the number 1 car in the list, and if you look at this car, you might be a little surprised this is my favorite. I think it's just so out of the ordinary from what I've seen from Denny Hamlin's cars. But the number 11 paint scheme for the Daytona 500 has to be my favorite, honestly. Like I said, I love the cleanliness, the cut lines of the triangles in between. I love the ombre of the purple to like the lighter purple pink to orange. It's just fascinating, and it's a really pretty car. I love the paint scheme and the colors. So that is my top 5, number 1, Denny Hamlin's car in my favorite paint schemes. I want to do the honorable mentions. I loved Eric Almirola's car, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson's car. The new paint scheme for the number 5 I really enjoyed. In Truex's car, the number 19, I appreciated the paint schemes as well as honorable mentions that could have edged their way into the top 5, but unfortunately did not. Now that the fun is over looking at the paint schemes for the Daytona 500, we got to go into what I'm calling lining up the odds. Yes, the little pun there above the yellow line, lining up the odds. We're going to look at the numbers for the Daytona 500 and who I think has the best shot here. Now, of the active drivers, the best average finish of the Daytona 500 is Michael McDowell. His best average is 12.5, best of any of the other drivers. His best finish is 4th place, and that was back in 2017. So maybe a dark horse contender here. He might be able to pull off a win at some point. He does, like I said, best average finish. The numbers work in his favor there. The active driver with the most wins here is Denny Hamlin. You've probably heard he is trying to make history, having the 3rd consecutive win at the Daytona 500 this year in 2021, winning in 2019 and 2020. So the odds of Denny Hamlin winning this race are actually extremely high if you look at the numbers here, at least with the most wins at the track. Also, if you look at the last 4 winners of the Daytona 500, the odds also favor Denny Hamlin. Austin Dillon did win in 2018 as one of the last 4 winners of the track, so he knows the way around, so don't count him out as well. So I'm saying all these numbers, and here's why I'm also going to say the numbers here sort of do not matter. Now I'm going to do this for all the other tracks where the numbers will matter a lot more, but Daytona 500, it is a crapshoot. The data is a mess. The average finishes, someone probably finished second, then 35th, and then 12th, and the numbers are so messy for this race. It is a crapshoot. It's not over until it's over, and you don't know who's going to finish this race until the checkered flag waves and the cars actually cross the finish line. And even then, someone might cross the finish line backwards. So it is a crapshoot lining up the odds. But if I had to choose one driver, maybe two, one driver to win the Daytona 500, I think Eric Jones as an underdog would be the perfect driver to win this race. I say this because he has won at this track before for the Coca-Cola 600 in July of 2018. He ended up winning, and then he finished third at the Daytona 500 in 2019. With those recent average successes, and especially if you look at Talladega last year where he was in second place, another super speedway that's kind of a crapshoot, he seems to have the best odds. Now, he is in a different car and a different manufacturer and team this year, but the talent, I think, got him to where he needed to be for the super speedway races in the past few years. So I'm not counting Jones out at all, even though he is at a different team. So that is my prediction for who will win the 2021 Daytona 500, the 63rd running. Let me know your prediction in the comments below. And thank you so much for listening to Above the Yellow Line, podcast number 4, the show where we talk about all the updates, theories, news, and recaps for the NASCAR Cup Series. The next podcast, I'm going to go over the events of the duels happening tonight on FS1 at 2 different times, 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Then I'll have a podcast up after the 500 and we'll break down the race and rate how well it did. I'm hoping it stays above the yellow line, which I'll explain when we get there. But until then, thank you so much for listening to Above the Yellow Line. I will see you next time when we talk about the duels. See ya.